Hi guys. Hi Rupa, thank you. I'm back. I was just taking a second to connect to our friends on YouTube. Hi everybody. Just have to adjust my audio so that it doesn't go a little crazy on YouTube. Hi guys. Hi Rupa, thank you. I'm back. I was just taking a second to connect to our friends on YouTube. All right. Hi, Umana, Malik, Vinod. Hi, everybody. How are you all? Nice to see you all here in YouTube land. Welcome. So Jay and I from E2 have organized to do a little extra class on listening part C because people need it and it's test week, yeah? So hello to all my lovely friends in YouTube. Yeah, sorry, I haven't got my video on yet. I'm just dealing with YouTube and Zoom. I've got 2 applications open. Yeah, so nice to see you all there on YouTube. Let me go back to Zoom and turn my video on and say hi to everybody. Hi, everyone. There I am in 2 worlds. I am in Zoom world and YouTube world. Hello, everybody here. Hi, May. Hi, Manish. Pushali, no problem. Remember, these videos will go up into the E2 website, and I will ask Jay to put them up as soon as possible so that everybody can watch them tomorrow before the test. I'm aware that it's test week. So hi, May. Hi, Manish. Who else did I see? Rexy is here. Some of you have hi, Ma. So some of you have already been with me today because we did some writing practice, but we're going to do a little bit of listening part C, just listening part C today, okay? Normally we do listening and B and C together, but we are only going to do C today, and we're going to do a little bit of straightforward practice with a couple of little strategies that Jay and I suggest for helping you to try to get to the answers, yeah? Hi, Mohammed. I'm having an excellent day. Thank you. To my friends in YouTube, I will try to keep a little bit of attention on your questions, but because there are literally, well, there's 150 of you currently, and probably there'll be a few more. And I've also got 70 or so here in the E2 Zoom site. I've got a lot of people to focus on, okay? So I won't have a lot of chance to get your questions, okay? All right, guys, let's kick off, yeah? Best of luck to everybody who's doing the test this weekend too, by the way. Just had some good news in the last class I did where one of our E2 students was very, very happy to inform us that she got all of her Bs, and so is ready to not do OET anymore and kick off with her real life. So that's nice, isn't it? All righty, let me share my slides and we'll get into it, huh? Oops. What's going on here? All right. Full screening. All right, so we're doing a little bit of impromptu bonus practice for OET listening part C. As I said, thanks to my good buddies over at E2 Language for supporting myself and all of you guys. All right, so let's kick into it, yeah? Sorry, I'll just move that so I can see. Let's start with the overview of listening part C. Always good to start with the basics. So listening part C comprises 2 unrelated monologues or interviews. Let's make a really important point here. OET has said quite publicly and explicitly that there is no pattern to this. You might get 2 monologues, you might get 2 interviews, or you may get 1 monologue and 1 interview, all right? So you have to be prepared for any of those possibilities, okay? And what they say the test is, which is kind of reasonable, is health professionals talking about their work, all right? Now, this is kind of significant. Listening part A and listening part B are described as workplace conversations, things that you might hear or do in the workplace. Here we've got a slightly different context, all right? So the interview might be in the context of professional development. It could be a presentation on the radio. So it's not workplace, but it is professionals, usually very skilled professionals, talking about some of the nature of their work. Each of these audios, these unrelated monologues or interviews, is approximately 4 to 5 minutes long, okay? So you can expect part C in total to take around about 12, not more than 14 minutes, okay? With all of the time you get for reading and things. Okay, focus on listening for detailed argument, gist, which is general understanding, attitude, which relates to the way that a speaker feels about something, okay? And opinion, which is associated with argument as well, but is also their beliefs based on evidence, okay? And this wider set of focuses is some of the reason why listening part C is a little bit challenging. Some of the questions are in their nature more demanding, okay? A little bit like reading part C. For each of these audios, monologues or interviews, you get 6 3-option multiple choice questions per recording, okay? So a total of 12 in listening part C, okay? Each of those extracts is heard once only, like every piece of listening in OET, all right? So those are your basics. Right, so whenever we think about listening, we tend to think about it in a couple of obvious ways. One of them is before listening. What do we do before listening to prepare for our understanding, for answering the questions when the audio begins, okay? So we're going to start with that. I'm just going to describe a couple of relatively simple sounding strategies. The idea with a strategy, of course, is that you practice it, yeah? Okay, so what do we do before listening? I'm just going to move my screen out of the way so that I can see. So the point here is, my friends, before the audio begins, you're given reading time, okay? So you have 90 seconds. You have 90 seconds to read the questions before the recording begins. And the key point here that I want to make is that during this time, you shouldn't just sit there waiting, okay? And kind of going, oh, the audio hasn't started, I haven't got anything to do. When you're looking at the questions, when you're reading the context sentence, what you should actually be doing is what I call, or what is known as, activating your knowledge. Okay, so OET gives you a context sentence. It says the context sentence out loud before you're given 90 seconds. Now, they do that for a reason. They do that because they assume that the context means something to you, okay? So part of your reading is actually to look at this and ask yourself, what do you know about this situation already? If there's a topic that's mentioned, what do you understand by that topic? What does it make you think about? What language comes into your head, okay? And this is drawing on your worldly experience and more specifically for you guys as highly trained professionals, your professional and clinical experiences, right? Your training, okay? So you should read the context sentence and think about what you know about language use in this context. How will the person be speaking? How many people will be speaking? These sorts of things. And one of the first questions you should ask yourself in this reading time, and you can answer it quite quickly usually, luckily, is, will this be an interview or will this be a monologue? Okay, so let's have a little look at that for a second. Okay, so when I think about the 90 seconds, what I like to think about it as is establishing your purpose for listening. We never do anything much without a purpose. And you have a purpose for listening. Obviously, it's to answer questions, all right, and get them right and get your OET and feel great. But more specifically, you have a much more detailed purpose to extract information, okay? So at the head of every set of 6 questions in listening part C, you have this little sentence, which we call the context sentence. It tells you a bit of basic but essential information about what you're going to hear, okay? So you need to read this context sentence. You will hear it as well, but you should read this context sentence at the top of the page, and you should do that to learn the text type. In this case, we've only got 2 choices, monologue or interview, all right? The speaker's name, that's going to be relevant, but it's not going to be something you need to think about overly, but it will tell you, for example, maybe who they are they a man or a woman, that kind of a thing. Their role, what they do, and of course, quite importantly, the topic, what are they speaking about, all right? So here's the context sentence for today's little practice that we're going to do together, and I've highlighted nice and clearly here what I mean by these things, okay? So here we've got gastroenterologist. So that is the speaker's role. That is what the speaker does, okay? So I don't need to tell you guys that this makes that speaker a highly trained specialist, all right? I think they're dealing with the digestive system and stomachs and all of that kind of stuff that you guys understand much better than me, all right? we can see that it's a person called Veronica Schulman. Now, you may not recognize this because names are a little bit different in languages, but this tells me that this is a woman, all right? And that's not insignificant. You immediately know that you're going to hear a woman speak, okay? More significantly, we see the word presentation, okay? Now, a presentation is a one-way thing, all right? So this tells me, this word tells me that we're going to be hearing a monologue, okay? Not an interview, all right? An interview would actually, a context sentence would actually use the word interview, okay? So this is a person speaking to an audience in the hypothetical world in a monologue, all right? What's she speaking about? Well, she's speaking about IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome, okay? So in a matter of seconds, you can establish a great deal about who you're going to hear, what they're going to be speaking about, and who else is going to be speaking. And in this case, it's one person, a gastroenterologist, speaking about IBS, okay? And, of course, the treatment. So we might assume because she's a gastroenterologist that she may be talking about how she treats it, all right? So there's a lot of things that should jump into your mind. And when I use the word activate, this is what I mean, okay? Not being passive, not simply waiting to hear, but actually actively going, okay, this is a specialist in stomachs and digestion talking about a reasonably common problem with the bowel, okay? All right, let's move on. The second thing you need to do in establishing your purpose for listening is, of course, to look at the questions, all right? So you have 90 seconds. A lot of people will say, gee, that's not very long. It doesn't feel like long, but you can actually achieve quite a lot in 90 seconds if you're focused, yeah? And you're focused on reading in the right way, shall we say, okay? So the next thing you need to do after reading the context sentence is to read the questions carefully, all right? And my first focus here is always on the actual question, not the options, okay? The question is ultimately the thing that you need to answer. The options, one of them is the answer, but the others are designed to not be the answer, but to look like it, okay? So don't overly focus on the options. We'll talk about that in a second, but I want you to carefully read the questions. And if I was doing the tests, I'm not, of course, I would actually only read the 6 questions, and I would read them quite carefully, more than capable of doing that in 90 seconds, yeah? What you should then do when you're reading the questions is try to establish what type of information they are focused on, all right? So in every question, and we'll see multiple examples today, in every question, there'll be 1 or 2 words which really indicate to you what that question is focused on, okay? It might be, for example, a word like feel. How does the speaker feel about this? If you see the word feel, you know that this is going to be an attitude question. This is when the speaker is actually talking about not just facts and information, but their perspective on it from a slightly emotional context, all right? This is not a good way to do it. As soon as you use a word like good, you're actually expressing an attitude, okay? And it's a feeling, it's bad, all right? So those sorts of things. The other thing you should do, which I think most of you in YouTube land and of course in E2 land are pretty familiar with, but we practice a lot, is thinking about keywords, okay, and the question to guide your listening. Keywords will be words that are associated with the content of the listening you're hearing, and they will actually act like little flags or signs that tell you, that's the information I'm listening for is coming soon. Okay, or is here now, all right? So they act like little signals for the content and ultimately, of course, hopefully, my friends, for the answer, yeah? And finally, associated with that, because you're thinking about words, we're calling them keywords, but ultimately they are words, you need to think about these keywords in the sense of how else they can be said, okay? And we see this word synonym, we see the idea of paraphrase a lot, because only occasionally is the keyword in the question exactly the same as the keyword that's said, okay? Sometimes it is because it's just easier and natural, but at other times, the speaker will use other words, other phrases, other ways to express the idea in the keyword, all right? So keywords, I really want to highlight this to all of you here, all right? Both in the E2 land and in YouTube. When I say keywords, I don't mean what I would call dumb keywords, which is simply, I'm going to listen for that word in the question, in the audio, because it's not always a matter of simple matching, okay? You're actually matching meaning, all right? And we're going to see a couple of really nice examples of that today. And it doesn't have to be sophisticated, but you know about English, you know about your own mother tongues. There are multiple ways to say the same thing, okay? So when you're looking at keywords, you are highlighting them. You're saying, maybe I'll hear that word, but you're also naturally thinking, maybe I'm going to hear that idea, not that word exactly. Okay. So you're doing a lot in 90 seconds, obviously, but it's amazing what our magnificent brains can do, particularly if we're really focused and a little bit nervous, right? Okay. So we've read the questions, we've read the context sentence. We already know a lot about today's little class, right? We know it's gastroenterologist talking about IBS to an audience. It's a one-way talk monologue, okay? We've read the questions, we're thinking about that. We can also read the options. Now, when I do these tests, I actually don't focus on the options, and I'll tell you why, all right? One of the reasons that I don't focus on your options, A, B, or C, very closely is because at least 2 of them in every question are designed to actually appear like the answer, but not be the answer, okay? These are what are known technically, for a test writer like me, as distractors, okay? So the thought is that if you read all of the distractors and the answer, when you are listening, you have a great deal of information already in your head, and all of the sound and words and meanings comes to you, and you're busy trying to sort out what was true and what wasn't true from the options. Okay, so my preference is to read the question, hear the text, and quickly choose from the options when you're listening. Okay, but I'm also aware that the burden for you guys is a lot higher than me. I am, of course, listening to my native tongue, so it's going to be slightly easier. Yeah, and I'm slightly more experienced at that sort of thing. All right, so we're now going to think about what we can do when we look at the options in the 90 seconds, okay? Because I think that's a legitimate strategy. And I want to highlight this. Strategies and methods, as Jay likes to call them, they are designed to fill a gap when you can't do it in the way that you would normally do it, all right? So one of the things about a strategy is if one strategy doesn't work for you, you may need to adjust it, okay? Or you may need to build another strategy underneath it to support it, or you may need to stop using that strategy and try another, okay? So when you're doing this kind of task, actually any of the OET, to be honest, you need to be a little bit flexible, and you need to be able to reflect, think about your practice and go, well, I was trying to do it that way, but it didn't really work for me. So is there something I can do a little bit different next time that may support my success? All right. And I really, really encourage you to be flexible about that. So here's another strategy you can use. You might read your ABC choices. I'm going to use the word options. Okay. When you read those options in the 90 seconds, you can ask very, very basic and quickly answered questions. What's similar about the 3 choices? Is there anything routine about them? They'll all be about IBS probably, or all be about what the speaker says. But is there anything else that you notice that looks a little bit like a pattern? Okay. The obvious question when you ask what's similar about something, of course, is there anything that's glaringly different? Okay. Sometimes you'll look at 3 choices and you'll see that 2 just simply but can't both be true. They almost cancel each other out. Okay. Not always, and it's actually a function of quite bad test writing if there are too many questions like that. But sometimes it is just the case that if A is true, C can't really be really true. All right. And you can notice that before you've even listened. All right. And that gives you a very, very interesting insight into the listening. And you think, well, one of them might be true, but both can't. You've already eliminated one type of choice. You ask yourself a very, very serious question. And here I'm actually asking you to use your native intelligence. This is not a language skill. This is a product of your high education and your natural intelligence. You should ask yourself, are any of the 3 options, A, B, or C, more or less plausible? Plausible means sort of realistic, believable, okay? And sometimes when you look at a question and you ask yourself, of A, B, and C, which one do I think is the most likely? One of them, you just think, that doesn't seem like it's going to be the case, all right? Now, you don't know yet because you haven't listened, but you've already got a theory and a prediction which you can confirm or deny when you listen, okay? That's a much more powerful way to extract answers. You're thinking, I think the answer is A, and I definitely think it can't be B. And you're kind of listening going, okay, that's kind of like A. Oh, no, they did say B. So you sort of actually can confirm or deny it, right? You don't have to be right then. You have to be right after, okay? Can you predict the most likely option? Sometimes you'll feel very confident. And remember, once or twice, my friends, because you are all highly trained specialists, the subject that the person is speaking about might actually be something you know about, okay? They're not trying to match it with your experience, all right? But it is just the case that occasionally they'll be speaking about something and you'll be like, oh, wow, this is what I do all the time. Or I just trained at university for 4 years on this subject, so I know a great deal about it. So you can be lucky as well. I know many of you think that this test is very, very difficult and you can't be, but it is the case that occasionally you can. I'll give you one example. A very, very excellent student that I had last year, she went to OET and in one of the listening tasks, one of the subjects was about breastfeeding and about maternity, right? And she was a pediatrician. She had been working with pregnant women a lot. She said that when she heard the information, she knew a lot about it, and so it was easier, all right? So there is some possibility of that, and predictions, they rely on your background knowledge, and you can make them. But even I can do it, my friends, and I'm not a specialist, all right? I'm just kind of a good guesser. All right, and then of course, as I said, do any of the options cancel each other out? So let's have a little example here. Here's the first question we're going to look at. I just want you to look at it. I'll just give you 15 seconds, not long, guys, because remember we have 6 questions, 90 seconds. So on a piece of rough mathematics, that's about 15 seconds per question. But I'll just give you 15 seconds to have a little look at this and think about those strategies that I was just mentioning. And then I'll show you my analysis of this particular question. Okay. All right. So I'm not going to necessarily, you guys can have a little think about it. I'll have a quick look in the chat now just to see. All right. So some of you have already made predictions. Very nice. Very nice. Interesting. Interesting. So a couple of people have already selected B. And it's very interesting to think why. Some of you have selected A. That's reasonable because it's plausible. Okay, so that's fine. Don't just predict, though. Don't forget about things like keywords. So let's have a look. So here's Craig's super multicolored analysis. All right. So we can see here, my friends, yellow equals keywords. Because remember, don't just focus on these. Here is what you're answering. Yeah, the question. So I've highlighted just a couple of bits, general point. Now, that's all I highlighted, actually, because this tells me that the focus here is something like, it's not the main idea of the introduction, but it's a structural element of the argument, all right? So this speaker is going to make some very general claim about IBS, okay? And that is very obvious, in a sense, in the introduction, okay? Beyond that, I started to show you now, red is bad news for me here. It means that I think this is unlikely. So I thought about this and I thought, well, IBS, I don't think it's uncommon. So let's make sure you understand what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that IBS isn't widespread or isn't common at all, but so widespread. And I thought to myself, that makes it sound like there's an epidemic or a massive worldwide sort of upscaling of people with IBS. And I just thought that isn't true. Okay. Maybe you guys can tell me I'm wrong because you guys know more about it, right? So I felt that that was slightly unlikely. In fact, quite unlikely. But you can see here that it needs more attention for an expert gastroenterologist. That made sense to me. I thought, well, this lady, Dr. Schulman, is a gastroenterologist who's clearly studied IBS. So it might be quite likely for her to say, look, yeah, this quite serious condition needs more attention. But I'm not convinced that IBS has become so widespread, right? So you can see what I mean here. I'm making little guesses, little what we call educated guesses, yeah? Down here, I've got maybe, and I highlight that as plausible because maybe is a very, it's quite weak, actually. It's not strong, right? And it's very, very common for academic and intellectual kind of context for people. That's got a name. It's called hedging, all right? We say may, we say possibly, because we want to weaken our claim so that it's not so strong that it's easy to knock down, okay? So I highlighted that because it appeared to be quite a convincing way that a person in a sort of a semi-academic medical context like this might speak. And then I said, connected in some ways to stressful lifestyle. And you know what, my friends? I said that that was very plausible because even I know that some people say, or a lot of people say, that IBS is connected to stress and, you know, unhealthy living and bad diets and things like that. So that for me became my prediction because I think it's highly likely, okay? And then the next one you can see, again, I had a problem with it. Responds well to initial treatment. That seems reasonable, right? She might talk about that because that's the subject, but it usually recurs. Again, I was thinking, well, my problem is really with the word usually, actually. And even I know a few people with IBS, actually. I'm just drawing on my world knowledge here, going, well, does it always come back? Well, it's hard to get rid of. I know that from the public's perspective, right? But does it usually recur? And I thought, well, maybe not, all right? So this is what I mean by predicting, yeah? And I think that most of you can see, actually, that most of you are probably much better positioned to make this kind of prediction than me. I'm an applied linguist and a language teacher. There's books and books and books in the library and in the world that are full of information about IBS that I have no idea about, right? Okay, so this is the idea, yeah? And so I really, really want you to think, this is what I mean by activate. This is what I mean by being active. You're not afraid to make a prediction here now because it's going to help you make sense of all of this blah, blah, blah that you hear later, okay? Okay, so yeah, well, there's different accents. I think we've got a British accent today, Rosa. So, you have to be prepared for that. Everybody there in both worlds, YouTube and here, OET has said explicitly the construct, which is my technical word for what they're trying to test. The construct of international medical kind of mobility includes accents from all around the world. It has to, right? Think about your ambitions. You're moving from one country to the next, right? The accents from where you are to where you're going are going to be varied and different, all right? So you've got a little collection here, yeah? And you can't avoid that. So if that is a problem for you, you need to think about strategies for working out, getting exposure to different accents, okay? It's a good point, Rosa, but it is part of the reality of things too, yeah? All right, so this is what I mean by pre-reading, okay? Pre-listening, excuse me. All right, any questions before we move on? Difficult connection today, Badri. I'm sorry, my friends. All right. Yeah, A seems very unlikely to me. All right. So what I'm going to do, my friends, now is we're going to go through the process. I'm going to show you the rest of the questions. Okay. I'm going to ask you to give you 15 seconds to read each of these questions. Remember, we're not listening yet. We're still in our 90 seconds of reading time, okay? And I'm taking you through it step by step because I don't want you to waste this time, because I know for a fact that if you do nothing in this time, it makes the test part, the actual audio, far more challenging. So I'm going to go through the questions, 15 seconds per question. Just do exactly what you did here. Look at the keywords, look at the options, make intelligent guesses about which is more or less likely, which might be the answer. Are there any differences between the choices? All right. There's no rule here. It's just about being active and listening, reading very, very carefully and rapidly. Okay. You don't need to share your ideas here, guys, because as soon as I've given you 15 seconds per question, we're going to go straight into the practice. Okay. Here we go. Just shut me. All right, so that's our reading time. So let's get ready for some raw practice now, my friends. But wait, there's one more thing I need to tell you. We have just had our 90 seconds of reading time. You've looked through each of the questions quite rapidly, and I know it's fast. Your reflection is that if 15 seconds as a sort of a brute calculation, sort of 6 times 15 is 90. If that's not enough, or it's too challenging for you, you should probably think about maybe reading very, very carefully at least 3 of the questions, okay? That's what I mean about being flexible with strategies, all right? So I'm not saying that simply because I can read these questions quite rapidly in 90 seconds, you have to. That's kind of part of the challenge. But look, if you said, I need to read the first 3 really, really carefully, that'll give me a strong start and I'll be into the flow of the talk, that would be enough, okay? So again, this is what I mean. Think about whether or not this works exactly for you or whether you can adjust it for your own reading speed and also your style, yeah? When the audio begins though, my friends, there is a little bit more good news. At the beginning of the talk, whether it's an interview, whether it's a monologue, there's always approximately 15 seconds, sometimes more, where you're not listening for the answer to a question, okay? You're actually just listening to an introduction. You're listening to the person introduce themselves, talk about the topic, all right? So this is the moment when you go, oh, great. Now I'm just concentrating. I'm kind of just enjoying myself listening, all right? Not obsessing about the question. Because at that moment, you're listening, you're following along with the speaker, and you're waiting for one of your signs of the question, all right? One of the key words, one of the phrases you read in the reading time, okay? So a lot of people think that as soon as the audio begins, it's like a wave, like a rush. Oh, I'm answering questions straight away. But you're not. You have a little bit of time. Again, it doesn't feel like much, but it is a significant amount of thinking time where you're going, oh, great. All I need to do is, okay, there's the lady saying her name. Now she's telling me the topic. All right, now she's gone to the introduction. Now I'm really focused on the question. All right? So don't panic when the audio begins. In fact, take a deep breath and catch up with the flow. So this time is for adapting to the pace of the talk and the accent, of course, as Rosa rightly points out. Tuning in, kind of really getting your listening going. Remember, listening it requires a lot of concentration. It's not a superficial sort of brief thing you do. It requires a great deal of effort. You're really concentrating. And then, of course, picking up on signals of the question to come. And signals here are our key words, the words that we read, and even our predictions that we just did, okay? All right, so we're going to do a monologue. And I'll just give you a couple more tips about a monologue before we do 6 questions on the trot, yeah? So in a monologue, monologues are, let's be frank, my friends, they're a little bit harder, I suppose. You know, a monologue is sort of just one person speaking, so you're concentrating a great deal more. In an interview, the good news in an interview is that the guest speaker in the interview always provides the answer. So when the interviewer asks a question, it's going to be a question that is very similar to the question you are answering. But you also know that that is a break in the talk when you can go, okay, the interviewer is speaking now. I'm focusing on what the question is they're asking, but I'm not listening for the answer until the expert begins to speak again. So you get a little break, like a little island if you're swimming between questions, okay? In a monologue, it's tougher. So in a monologue, you need to listen out for signpost language or organizational language that the speaker uses that shows where they're going and what they're doing next, okay? So you need to listen out for signpost language that indicates a change of topic or what is coming. And here's a real example from today's lecture that we're going to listen to, okay? So next, we know what it means. All of us who are watching this knows what that means, but the speaker uses it to tell the audience about what is to come, okay? And then she says, so next I'll talk a little bit about how, okay? I didn't put the topic there. That is what I call a signpost. It's called a discourse marker. It has a lot of fancy names, all right? But you know what it is. It's the speaker waving a flag, holding a sign up going, hey guys, now I want to talk about something else. How something, okay? You need to become sensitive to that. Good speakers anyway, good public speakers use this to organize their talk for themselves, but also so that the people who are listening can follow it, okay? Doesn't matter whether you're a native speaker or a non-native speaker, it can be incredibly difficult to sit there and listen to one person drone on if they don't organize it so that you know what's happening, okay? So look out for that, or listen out, or practice listening out for that as well. The other thing you want to do is listen carefully for the keywords or close paraphrase of the questions. And remember, this is the pre-listening strategy that I mentioned already, okay? So here's question 39, okay? So this is one of the questions we're going to answer today, and I just put it here. So you can see the treatment for IBS favored by Dr. Schulman first involves. Here's the piece of the transcript or the audio that she's going to meet. It's related to this one, right? But look at the connection. Treatment. My Dr. Schulman, okay? Patients, of course, is who she treats, right? So I favor. So there's a natural connection between the meaning of I like to treat my own IBS patients and the IBS treatment favored by Dr. Schulman, okay? So this is what I mean by keywords and paraphrase, all right? It's not just that you're going to hear treatment, favor, okay? You see like, and there's a connection. Treat, there's a connection. IBS, my own IBS patients, all right? So this is what I mean. It's much more complex than simple matching of words that are written and words that you hear, okay? But you can see that she's helping you, all right? This is basically an indication that the next question or the content for the next question is coming up, all right? So your job here is to be concentrating so that you pick up these signs, okay? All right, so there is practice to be done. And what we're going to do here, my friends, I'll just actually have to share my audio, excuse me. I did the thing that I always do, which is forget to share it. I'm going to turn the volume up so that it's all nice and clear. Okay. So I'm going to show you 3 questions.
Good morning.
Right. There's 6 questions here, all right? But I've broken them into 3 so they're nice and clear, I hope, for you to see. You'll hear the audio. There's no context sentence here and no reading time because we've done that, okay? What I want to suggest to you guys is please don't put your answers into the chat, okay? I'm going to create a poll at the end of the practice, and you can show me your answers in the poll, or you can put them in the chat at the end, okay? So all I want you to do is listen, answer the questions, write your answers down on a piece of paper in front of you, like you would do in the test, okay? So that we can all look at the answers at the end and have a little discussion about any problems or questions that you've got coming, all right? Is everybody nice and ready? Okay, good. Please don't put your answers in the chat, guys, because it's confusing for your friends who are there. The problem is that everybody can see the chat. And so if you're putting A and they think it's B, they become disoriented, all right? So a really, a polite request, but a firm request, please don't put your answers in the chat. I'll give you a chance to write your answers down and we can share them all after we've done the 6 questions, okay? All right, YouTubers, you ready? Let's go.
Good morning. My name's Veronica Schulman and I'm a gastroenterologist. I'd like to talk to you today about irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. As many as 1 in 5 of the UK adult population are affected by IBS to some degree, and it's been the focus of much research in recent years. It's typical for those suffering from the condition to report frequent diarrhea or constipation, or a mixture of both. They also experience abdominal bloating and pain. I'm always surprised more people don't suffer from IBS because many of us lead such chaotic, highly pressured lives and are often unable to maintain regular eating habits, which seems to aggravate the condition. It's difficult to treat, with no single medicine consistently and reliably resolving the symptoms in all cases. To add to the problem, a small number of people have what's called refractory IBS. That's IBS that hasn't responded to the normal first-line treatments. Unlike today, in the past, IBS symptoms were easily confused with other conditions, and the difficulty in making a definite diagnosis increased the uncertainty and therefore the suffering of many patients. So what about making an accurate diagnosis of the condition nowadays? Well, there's a stool test which rules out infection, while an endoscopy will eliminate the possibility of inflammatory diseases such as Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, which share some symptoms with IBS. a comprehensive history, and special laboratory tests will in most cases prove that someone has IBS. The result is that the GP and the patient can trust in the accuracy of the diagnosis, and less time is wasted before starting an appropriate treatment. So next, I'll talk a little about how I like to treat my own IBS patients. It's been known for some time that diet is crucial, but opinions have varied considerably on which foods trigger the condition. I've become particularly interested in a group of starches and sugars, which many patients struggle to digest, and which are clearly linked to IBS symptoms. These starches and sugars are present in some grains, vegetables, and dairy products. Interestingly, they are also contained within one group of artificial sweeteners added to some food and occur naturally in certain fruits. I start my treatment of an IBS patient by putting them on a strict diet for up to 6 weeks. During this time, all foods with the starches and sugars we've identified as problematic are excluded, and then slowly they are reintroduced one at a time to see if there's an adverse reaction. Common problem foods include wheat, onion, garlic, and broccoli. Up to 75% of patients improve to some degree when they're in the initial exclusion stage. Sugars and starches are found in so many different foods, and it's unlikely that patients will be sensitive to all of them. In fact, it may only be 2 or 3. So, how do patients react to this approach? I'll tell you about a patient called Matt, who lived in fear of stomach pain. He'd almost become frightened to eat anything. He'd endured it for several years and had seen many doctors, and even been willing to experiment with alternative medicine. But none of the treatments had provided much relief. Like many IBS sufferers I meet, he was overwhelmed by the amount of information about nutrition that was available. But he had serious doubts about the very many claims made by companies promoting particular diets as miracle cures. Matt still believed his condition could at least be controlled and desperately wanted to try something that had solid research behind it. He was impressed by the steady and structured methods I rely on. Before seeing me, another patient I'll call Sophie had been told to cut out dairy produce from her diet, but she found it hard to sustain and her symptoms continued, although they were intermittent. By the time she was referred to me, Sophie had become confused about whether dairy was really causing her problems. Her IBS was getting worse because she was so anxious. When she followed my method, she was able to discover precisely which foods were triggering her symptoms, which in her case included beetroot, apples and oranges, all of which she particularly liked, and so was initially reluctant to give up. However, she knew there was no real alternative, and she's now made more or less a full recovery. Patients with IBS are often deeply concerned about the basic health of their bowel and can mistakenly think that it isn't normal in some way. I often have to reassure them that their bowel is just very sensitive and that it won't suffer any long-term damage. If a patient usually follows a diet which controls their symptoms, and one day they indulge themselves by eating something they shouldn't and get some symptoms, that's not going to do much harm. The diet can be resumed and the symptoms will resolve themselves.
All right, my friends, that's all she wrote. All righty, my friends, I'm going to launch the poll as I always do. And you can provide your answer A, B, or C in the poll, or if you prefer, you can put it straight into the chat. I don't really mind now. I like the poll because it allows me to see what answers you gave. Those of you who haven't done a poll before, you should be able to see on your screen something that allows you to choose your options A, B, or C. You can only choose one, okay? Like I said, if you just want to put your 6 answers in the chat, that's cool. YouTubers, I'll show you the key in just a second, yeah? Just getting a little bit of feedback from my YouTube buddies here. Strong support for B in question 1, which is unsurprising. We had a pretty good look at that. Most of you are going with your prediction. Don't be shy. I can't tell your answers. Nobody else can see your answers. Well, you can actually, if you put them in the chat, I can, but that's cool as well. Whoops. No, my friend, I can't. I want to know your answers. We'll look at the questions again afterwards, yeah? And we'll look at the key and the script. Hey, Anu, there's a very, very interesting rule. Typically, we suggest you don't change your mind because we know that about 60% of the time when people change their mind in tests, the second answer is wrong. It's a matter of statistical fact. I'm not sure why it's an actual fact, but yeah, it's peculiar. We typically get it wrong when we change our mind. It's a weird thing about being human. Remember, you're here to practice, guys. Don't get discouraged if you feel like it was too tough. All right, let's have a little look at the key now, yeah? I'll shut the chat for a second and you can have a look. Here's the actual key, my friends. This is as it was provided by OET. Okay. So I can see in my poll that largely you're in agreement, or 90% or 91% of you, excuse me, are in agreement with B. We're going to look at the text, the audio and the questions together very closely in a minute. So don't panic if you're confused, all right? We always do a bit of analysis, you know that. Okay, so yeah, 90% of you are saying B and the writer of this test is in agreement. Again, question 2, oh, it's big support for B there. We might have to have a little closer look at that. We'll look at all of them actually. Okay, because B is obviously distracting. Can't remember the question off the top of my head. Question 3, oh, nice support. Oh, it's 50-50, 50% for C, but pretty strong support for A as well. So we might have to have a little look at that one. Number 4, oh, well, we've got a small majority for B, which is the answer or the key. But actually, that's a very even one. 4 is very evenly distracted. 4, I think, is that the one about the patient? And then moving on. Ooh, interesting. Now, question 5, more people are choosing B and C, which are distractors. Interesting, interesting, interesting. What have we got in the chat? All right. Yeah, depends on the field, actually, Mary. Yeah, 60% in general. Ah, really? Ah, damn. Remember, we're here to practice, guys. So let's have a little look at, let's go through it together now. I'll just end the poll, excuse me. And we will diminish it too. All right, so here I've done a little bit of work for us, everybody. I hope the YouTubers can see that now. Okay, so we can have a little listen again. I've broken it into sections of 2 this time, okay? So we'll listen through. I've obviously, green is the intended key, and I've highlighted the piece of the audio text that they believe equates with that. We can have a little reflect on that, okay? Remember, my keyword was general point because it's kind of a focus of the question, but we can have a little look at the actual language as well, yeah?
Good morning. My name's Veronica Schulman, and I'm a gastroenterologist.
Sorry, I should say, very, very useful thing to do for your listening comprehension in general when you see text and audio next to each other. Just, I know it's probably not perfectly clear for all of you depending on what device you're watching, but if you're able to read this text as you listen, it's quite a useful way to what we would call make form and sound associations to match the written word with the spoken word, okay?
I'd like to talk to you today about irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. As many as 1 in 5 of the UK adult population are affected by IBS to some degree, and it's been the focus of much research in recent years.
Right. So those of you who chose A, we've already got a problem here. It's been a focus of much research. A says it needs more attention. Those two things can't both go. So we've got a little issue already, okay? So she is saying that quite a lot of people have it. She's actually not saying it's so widespread. She's saying it's pretty common. 20% of the UK adult population is not insignificant, okay? But she's also clearly saying there's been a lot of research recently, okay? So indication of a falsification of that part of A.
It's typical for those suffering from the condition to report frequent diarrhea or constipation or a mixture of both. They also experience abdominal bloating and pain. I'm always surprised more people don't suffer from IBS because many of us lead such chaotic, highly pressured lives and are often unable to maintain regular eating habits, which seems to aggravate the condition.
Right. So we've got quite a challenging paraphrase here, right? Many of us lead such chaotic, highly pressured lives and are often unable to maintain regular eating habits. That seems true, right? And that is basically paraphrased here rather nicely by stressful lifestyles, right? And then the part here, and you can see here already, quite a classic technique of test writers. The information, as it's stated in the audio, is reversed in the question, in the answer, okay? So we've got stressful lifestyles, which seems to aggravate the connection. That is the hedged, it may be connected, okay? Basically, this is a much more elegant piece of writing, obviously, because this is speaking, but that is the answer, that's the intended key. Okay, let's keep going though.
It's difficult to treat, with no single medicine consistently and reliably resolving the symptoms in all cases. To add to the problem, a small number of people have what's called refractory IBS. That's IBS that hasn't responded to the normal first-line treatments.
So we haven't actually got a recurrence, really, have we? We've got a lack of response from a small number of people, okay? So we've sort of, again, we've got two, even that part there, difficult to treat with no single medicine consistently and reliably resolving the symptoms in all cases. So we've got a question about the treatment in terms of responses, and there's no recurrence here, okay? So again, there's a problem with C. Any questions? Well, Sharena, we haven't got to the second one yet. Let's keep going. All right, so let's move on. Oops.
Good morning. My name's Veronica Schulman. No single medicine consistently and reliably resolving the symptoms in all cases. To add to the problem, a small number of people have what's called refractory IBS. That's IBS that hasn't responded to the normal first-line treatments. Unlike today, in the past, IBS symptoms were easily confused with other conditions, and the difficulty in making a definite diagnosis increased the uncertainty and therefore the suffering of many patients. So what about making an accurate diagnosis of the condition nowadays? Well, there's a stool test which rules out infection, while an endoscopy will eliminate the possibility of inflammatory diseases such as Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, which share some symptoms with IBS. A comprehensive history and special laboratory tests will in most cases prove that someone has IBS. The result is that the GP and the patient can trust in the accuracy of the diagnosis, and less time is wasted before starting an appropriate treatment. All right, so let's have a little look at that. So notice here, we have to be really clear about these markers. So in the question, we've got a clear reference to now. Today doesn't mean just today, of course, it means this moment in history, if you like.
And there's a lovely association with the very, very common phrase nowadays, right? Most of you know that, I'm sure, probably use it regularly. So this is what we call, this is a marker. This is an indication that we're getting a reference to something that's related to the question. You see here, we've got a reference to the past, which is kind of telling you, okay, we often talk about the past before we talk about now. So you get a little bit of a warm up. That's your key marker, your flag, your signpost, whatever you want to call it. Okay. The question says emphasizes, right? All she does is list them. There's a stool test, there's an endoscopy, and you can have a comprehensive history. That's not even a test, really, is it? And special laboratory test. So there's nothing really emphatic about that. It's just a matter of fact. Okay. So she's not emphasizing that there is a choice of range of that. She's emphasizing that all of these things that we can do allow both the GP, but more particularly the patient and the question, can trust in the accuracy of the diagnosis, all right? So basically, they can be sure that when somebody says, we think you've got IBS, that it actually is the case, all right? So it's emphatic in the sense that it's an outcome of all of these tests, but these are not emphasized. They are listed. It's not the same thing, right? Well, yeah, it is, I think, my friend. I think diagnosis is a nice keyword in terms of the question here. And you see here, very seldom will you get the same or different words all through. You might get diagnosis here, here, and here, or it'll just be in one of them. Okay? She's not emphasizing the tests. She's saying that all of the tests mean that we know that when a person's got it. Simple as that. She's listing the tests. Where's the emphasis here? There's a stool test, there's an endoscopy, right? So what, and then she actually, then she summarizes them and says a whole bunch of special laboratory tests, some of which will be these and maybe more, will in most cases prove that someone has IBS, right? She's making a direct argumentative claim, okay? Joseph, refractory IBS means, she gives us a definition, IBS that hasn't responded to normal first-line treatments, I guess the first ones, yeah? Patient can trust. That is absolute emphasis, and it's an attitude, right? She's pretty certain, yeah? So just because she listed a choice doesn't mean that there's an emphasis there, yeah? Let's move on and go through the next two.
So next, I'll talk a little about how I like to treat my own IBS patients. It's been known for some time that diet is crucial, but opinions have varied considerably on which foods trigger the condition. I've become particularly interested in a group of starches and sugars, which many patients struggle to digest, and which are clearly linked to IBS symptoms. These starches and sugars are present in some grains, vegetables, and dairy products. Interestingly, they are also contained within one group of artificial sweeteners added to some food and occur naturally in certain fruits. I start my treatment of an IBS patient by putting them on a strict diet for up to 6 weeks. During this time, all foods with the starches and sugars we've identified as problematic are excluded, and then slowly they are reintroduced one at a time to see if there's an adverse reaction. Common problem foods include wheat, onion, garlic, and broccoli. Up to 75% of patients improve to some degree when they're in the initial exclusion stage.
Right. So here again, we can see that same strategy I've already mentioned, very typical. In the text, it's a much more natural organization where she says, first of all, we take out these certain foods with starches, etc., in them, and then we slowly reintroduce them one at a time to see if there's any negative response. Here you see in the answer, again, the information is reversed, actually, in a slightly unnatural order, it's true. Not the most elegant question here, but nonetheless, clearly the answer, because what she does is take all of those away and then introduce them one by one slowly, okay? So we have, again, after avoiding, yeah? Let's keep going.
Sugars and starches are found in so many different foods, and it's unlikely that patients will be sensitive to all of them. In fact, it may only be 2 or 3. So, how do patients react to this approach? I'll tell you about a patient called Matt, who lived in fear of stomach pain. He'd almost become frightened to eat anything. He'd endured it for several years and had seen many doctors, and even been willing to experiment with alternative medicine. But none of the treatments had provided much relief. Like many IBS sufferers I meet, he was overwhelmed by the amount of information about nutrition that was available. But he had serious doubts about the very many claims made by companies promoting particular diets as miracle cures. Matt still believed his condition could at least be controlled and desperately wanted to try something that had solid research behind it. He was impressed by the steady and structured methods I rely on.
Right, a couple of important points. Obviously, you're going to be very, very happy when you see a question with a person's name in it, okay? Because those things, not only do they stand out in writing, but they stand out in speaking as well. Now, this is an interesting thing that I want all of you to reflect on. In several of the monologues that we've been given by OET as, if you like, official practice, you can see that in these monologues, it's very common for the expert to speak about one or two case studies of patients, okay? So this appears to be a reasonable pattern where you're not going to 100% assume it, but it's quite likely that if you get a monologue somewhere along the line, this expert is going to talk about a hypothetical patient or a research subject they've mentioned. In this case, Matt has to be a key word because it's so clear to hear it, all right? The next question, you see another example, Sophie, the name Sophie, all right? The other word that I highlighted here was skeptical. It's not so much a content word as a word that's related to the meaning of the sentence, intimately related to the notion of doubt. In fact, we get our word doubt from the meaning of skepsis from Greek, okay? So there's a very, very blunt association there. Another good example of a keyword not being said in the talk, but being paraphrased in the talk. This one is a much more normal way to say something. He has suspicions. He doesn't believe it entirely, okay? And the answer here is the large number of apparently easy solutions. We see this phrase, miracle cures, okay? A miracle, of course, is something that acts against nature, or an act of God, I guess is another way you can call it. But here we've got it paraphrased as apparently easy solutions, okay? No questions? The chat is silent. That's nice. And the last two, my friends.
Before seeing me, another patient I'll call Sophie had been told to cut out dairy produce from her diet, but she found it hard to sustain and her symptoms continued, although they were intermittent. By the time she was referred to me, Sophie had become confused about whether dairy was really causing her problems. Her IBS was getting worse because she was so anxious. When she followed my method, she was able to discover precisely which foods were triggering her symptoms, which in her case included beetroot, apples and oranges, all of which she particularly liked, and so was initially reluctant to give up. However, she knew there was no real alternative, and she's now made more or less a full recovery. Patients with IBS are often deeply concerned about the basic health of their bowel, and can mistakenly think that it isn't normal in some way. I often have to reassure them that their bowel is just very sensitive, and that it won't suffer any long-term damage. If a patient usually follows a diet which controls their symptoms, and one day they indulge themselves by eating something they shouldn't and get some symptoms, that's not going to do much harm. The diet can be resumed and the symptoms will resolve themselves.
Alrighty, my friends, let's just move on quickly. Queries, disputes. All good? All right, I like it. I like it when you guys don't argue with me. All right, a couple of things to remember before I give you a bit of a chance to ask questions, and I might have a quick chat to my YouTube buddies as well. Things to remember. You have 90 seconds to read the questions before the audio. Remember, the first part of this class today was a big focus on before listening, being active, really activating your background and wired experience in some of these things to make the listening task slightly less challenging. Not easy, of course. Okay, so remember, we're thinking about words like keywords, we're making predictions, we're reading the context sentence to understand who we're listening to, what they're talking about, and what type of text it is immediately. Is it an interview or a monologue? Okay. Remember, there is a small period at the beginning of the audio. We call it the introduction, ultimately, before information related to the first question is mentioned. So you're not answering questions immediately. Don't panic. Take a deep breath, listen, and get into the flow of the talk, right? As I said, use that time to focus on the question and make predictions about the options. As the audio comes to you, you're slowly moving through the questions as well. In an interview, because we might have an interview, the interviewer asks a paraphrased version of the test question, and the expert guest always provides the answer, all right? So interviews give you this little break where the second speaker, the interviewer, breaks up the talk of the expert person providing the answer, all right? And they're asking the same questions ultimately. They're not written exactly the same, they are paraphrased. Again, that idea we see all the time. Remember, in a monologue, to listen out for signpost language that indicates a change of topic, like the example we saw. Next, I'm going to talk about, or something like that. Listen carefully out for these keywords as signs and signals, or close paraphrase of the questions. At the end of part C, you have 2 minutes to check your answers for the whole test. I think that's still true. Better check that, actually. It has been true, all right? But remember, that's not a transfer time, because remember, in all of the listening multiple choice, you answer the question like this, right? And this is really Craig's way of saying, please remember to read the instructions. But because listening part B and listening part C, and in fact, reading part B and reading part C for that matter, are multiple choice, OET wants you to bring a dark pencil, a 2B pencil, and to color in your choice of answer, okay? So that's how you answer. You don't have to transfer. Nice and easy. Yes? Okay, and they suggest a 2B pencil, which is a darker type of lead pencil. All right, of course, I guess you can use a black pen if that's your preference. Here's my list of useful resources that I always show you. Okay. Yeah, good point, Leni. Leni has asked, made a very, very good point. And let's just make this clean. Leo has made a beautiful point. And this is always true, Leni. Question 37 is always before question 38. So you can see it's in a line, and it's actually almost like paragraphs in a reading, yeah? This is true of listening part C and reading part C. You never get one question here, the answer to one question here, and the answer to one question there, right? You get it answer, lower in the text, okay? So they're not asking you to listen backwards and forwards and move between questions, all right? It is a sequence of questions, one after the other in the audio as well. Great.
So
great point. Great point. Absolutely true. That's how you need to think about it. So you can't listen back. You don't need to listen back. If one answer goes, you're waiting for the next question, yeah? All right. Question and answer street the same. Exactly right, my friend. Okay. That's my pleasure, Cedra. It's lovely to have you. All righty, my friends. Any other questions? I'm just going to remember, my friends, those of you who are free members here today, it's really, really great to have you both on YouTube and, of course, here in the Zoom chat and in the Zoom class. Jay wanted me to mention, and of course I must mention our awesome friends at E2. Here's a good chance for you to perhaps upgrade, yeah? Remember all of the things that E2 brings. It's not just beardy old Craig talking about OET live on the class, but that is one of the things we do. And remember, we're really lucky right now. Every day there is Jay in the morning and Craig in the afternoon. So you've got times that suit you depending on what part of the world you're in. We hope that we can meet most of the demands with those 2 time slots, yeah? So the live classes are daily, and there are 2 daily where Jay and I do the same skill, okay? And we're both awesome, so don't worry about which class you come to, all right? The other thing, of course, we do is we do one-to-one tutorials, and we have a gang of fabulous, super good E2 teachers. Sometimes I do it as well, although I'm quite busy with this at the moment, but you don't need me. You need any one of our awesome, experienced, expert E2 teachers. And this is particularly, the one-to-one tutorials are particularly useful, not only useful, but particularly useful for speaking and writing, yeah? Because there is nothing better than doing some speaking or writing and having it in front of a person who knows what they're talking about and giving you direct, accurate feedback on your performance, okay? So I really recommend it, okay? The live classes that we do daily are uploaded to the E2 website into the learning management environment there, the learning environment, so that you can watch them at your leisure, watch them again, watch them 10 times, as many times as you like. Very, very useful. And that means that if you can't come to the live class, no big deal, right? You watch the video, which is a very cool feature, I think. And then there's lots of cool self-study, self-access practice materials, including practice tests. Just yesterday, Jay put up 2 new reading tests, complete reading tests. So I think now there's probably maybe 5 or 6 or 7. I don't know, actually. I can't even remember. I wrote quite a few of them a long time ago, but I haven't looked recently. I think there's at least 5 and counting. And I know he's working on in the next week or 2 on some new listening ones as well to go with those new reading. And then, of course, we have feedback. We have the capacity to submit your writing to the E2 system and get some lovely feedback again from one of our expert teachers. Yeah, so, you know, there's a lot you can get. And Jay has said that you can upgrade for free today if you simply click the upgrade button in your E2 account. Yeah. All righty, my friends, lots of thank yous. Oh, you're all very kind to me today. What have we got? Thanks, thanks, thanks. Well, everyone's saying thank you. Well, I say thank you to all of you. There's too many people to say thank you to. Wowee. Any questions, anyone? I don't think I had any more slides. Oh, there's OET. Good old OET. Badria, my pleasure. All of you, my friends, thank you very much. Yeah, Rexy, it's very uncommon to have exactly the same words or phrases. Ultimately, Rexy, that would simply be too easy. Yeah? Yeah, the next 2 days, Miriam, is very intense. Jay and I are back tomorrow with some writing practice, yeah? And then a couple of tips about test day as well. All right, thank you all, my friends. Oh, I know you're flying to Mexico City. What a wonderful place it is. Big, giant, sprawling place. 1 a.m. You need to get some rest. Absolutely, my friends, because even flying, you need to be feeling perfect when you get to that test, yeah? I know you're going to do well, my friend. I know it. Carito, I'll just have to write that down. Sorry, buddy. It'll have to be tomorrow, okay, bud? Alrighty, my friends, I'm just going to stop the share and I'm just going to put my video back on. And I'm just going to end that show because I don't think I need that anymore. All right, my friends, I'll just move that over. All right, how's my friends in YouTube going? Everybody all right? Ooh, lots of answers. Next live class is tomorrow, but it's not free. I think the next free live class is next Wednesday, speaking, yeah? Neymar, no worries, my friends. Good to see you. Oh, I'm glad, guys. I hope it was useful, huh? Best of luck. Janani was diagnosed as fine. It can be both, actually. Has been diagnosed is probably the most common way, if it's still true, yeah? All righty, guys. All good? Remember, practice makes perfect, yeah? Just keep chipping away, guys. All righty. No worries, Fernanda. Good to see you, eh? Badria, that's what Jay has said. You need to log into your E2 account and click the upgrade button. I don't know what happens after you press it, though, sorry, because I've never done it, obviously. Min, how can you ask a question in private? I'd have to change my chat settings. Yeah, keep working, my friends. Keep working. I'm glad that these classes are useful. Min, I'm not sure at the moment because I've got public chat settings on, so I don't think so. Oh, Min, you can put your question in Q&A and it'll be private. Can you see Q&A, Min? Other people can't see that. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Anu. My pleasure. You'll do well, buddy. Don't worry about it. No, my pleasure. Mayoran, no. There's a video going to be on E2. The slides belong, well, they ultimately belong to Jay, actually, because I made them for him, yeah? Aisha, yeah, there's not a lot of books, is there? I really don't, actually. And I don't know. I haven't seen enough of them, unfortunately. But there's not a lot of materials, unfortunately. So I really, off the top of my head, I can't recommend anything other than the official samples, yeah? All right. Okie dokie. All right, my YouTube friends, take care. Nice to see you, eh? I'll see you. If you can't find the upgrade button, you need to message the guys at E2 because unfortunately, even though I can help you with so many things, I can't help you with that. No, this video won't go onto YouTube, I don't think, yeah? You'd have to check with Jay because I don't know. I'm not beautiful enough to stay on YouTube forever. Linda, if you want to send your writing in order to get feedback, you need to sign up for an E2 account, okay? And then you can submit quite a few depending on which particular subscription you get, yeah? Okay, that was Linda Nebo, yeah? Janani, you need to make your question a little bit clearer, my friend. Correct to use a colon before starting what? Rosa, I'm sure you are, my friend. It's my problem, huh? Russia, the recorded classes, when you have to log into your E2 account, and when you go in there, you'll see your what we call your dashboard, and your recorded classes are on the left-hand side, and it says recorded classes. Literally, it has a little camera icon. Okay. Oh, really, Shwana? Yeah, nervousness. It's an issue. Mayaran, you have to, yeah, when you log in, you see a tab in your E2 dashboard that's called recorded classes on the left-hand side. Okay. Chris, sample responses. Well, there's only a few really. There's a few on the OET website that are worth looking at. They're not great. Okay. But they're representative. Good question, Ali Khan. Both, Ali Khan. In the OET website, yeah, they put the address at the top. Sorry, the date at the top, don't they? And in the OET samples, they put it underneath the address. Both of those are actually quite acceptable, to be honest. I mean, I actually do it the other way. I put it underneath the address. Just choose which one of those that you're used to and do it the same way every time. Ali Khan is my suggestion, actually. And actually, if you're really, really worried, copy the OET sample, okay? Both of them are true, though, if you... Man, if you, depending on what scores you get, the most important thing about any scores you get, whether is what, so if you're applying to register for, say, the National Health Service or, I don't know, to one of the professional societies in Australia, the scores you need are set by them, not by OET. So what happens when you do or don't get their scores is decided by them. All right. So for example, for the National Health Service, I think that you can achieve your B scores or C plus scores over a couple of tests. But if you're a doctor, you can't. All right. But you have to know what it is the organization you're registering to expects. Okay. Because OET doesn't set those standards. They test the standards, and the standards are what's expected are set by everybody else. All right, my friends, my YouTube friends, I'm going to take off now, okay? All right, it's nice to see you all. Oh, look, it's quite fun to look at myself. Look at me, I'm moving around too much. Next live class for free on YouTube is next Wednesday, okay? All righty, guys, I'm going to stop the YouTube now, okay? Nice to see you all. Take care. Good luck if you're doing the test in the weekend, yeah?